What is the biggest lie sold to your generation? Story 1. Plastic recycling was never the simple closed-loop solution we were sold. A lot of us remember the shift. Paper bags to plastic because plastic is recyclable. More packaging switched from cardboard to plastic for the same reason. Single-use plastics felt justified because the assumption was, we'll just recycle it and keep it in circulation forever. That's not how it played out. Only certain types of plastic are widely recyclable, and even then the process is limited. Different resin codes, contamination from food waste, dyes, mixed materials, all of that makes recycling complicated and expensive. Many plastics degrade in quality each time they're recycled, meaning they can't just be reused indefinitely in the same form. Globally, only a small percentage of plastic ever produced has actually been recycled. A large portion ends up landfilled, incinerated, or in the environment. Recycling wasn't meaningless, but it was oversimplified. Plastic became dominant largely because it's lightweight, durable, and cheap to manufacture from fossil fuels. The economic incentives were strong. Recycling was part of the messaging, but cost and convenience were powerful drivers. The idea of infinite reuse sounded clean. The reality has been far messier. Story 2. Climb the corporate ladder. It sounds linear, predictable, merit-based. Work hard. Get promoted. Repeat. But long-term labor data shows career progression is rarely a straight upward climb. It's more like plateaus, lateral moves, restructuring, and sometimes layoffs that reset the board entirely. Promotions often depend not just on performance, but visibility, office politics, timing, economic cycles, and who's advocating for you in rooms you're not in. There's also the Peter principle, the idea that people are promoted until they reach a level where they're no longer competent. It's not universal, but organizational research shows management skill and technical skill aren't the same thing. Being great at your job doesn't automatically mean you'll be great at supervising others. And then there's burnout. Studies consistently show higher-ranking roles often come with longer hours, more stress, and diminishing marginal happiness after income reaches a certain threshold. None of this means advancement is impossible. It means the latter metaphor is misleading. Careers are ecosystems, not staircases. Story 3. If you don't go to college, you'll die broke and alone on the street. That line was drilled into a lot of people like it was statistical fact. It isn't. College graduates on average earn more over a lifetime. That part is supported by labor data, but averages hide variation. Field of study matters. Debt load matters. Geographic location matters. Economic cycles matter. A degree in one field can dramatically out-earn another. Meanwhile, skilled trades, entrepreneurship, technical certifications, and apprenticeships can produce stable, high-income careers without a four-year degree. Electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians, welders, and specialized contractors often earn strong wages with far less student debt. The real predictor of long-term financial stability isn't just college or not. It's skills that are in demand, adaptability, financial literacy, work ethic, and the ability to navigate opportunity. College can be a powerful lever. It is not a guaranteed outcome machine, and not going doesn't automatically sentence someone to failure. The world is more complex than a single fork in the road at 18. Story 4. Fat is bad. Sugar is good. In the late 20th century, dietary fat, especially saturated fat, was blamed for heart disease. Food companies responded by creating low-fat products. But when you remove fat, you remove flavor and texture. So what replaced it? Sugar. Refined carbohydrates, additives to make low-fat food taste good again. The problem is that not all fats are equal. Unsaturated fats, like those found in nuts, olive oil, avocados, and fish, are associated with better cardiovascular outcomes. Even saturated fat is more nuanced than once portrayed, depending on context and overall diet. Meanwhile, excessive added sugar intake is strongly linked to obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and cardiovascular risk. Sugar spikes blood glucose and insulin in ways that constrain metabolic systems when consumed chronically in high amounts. Nutrition science has evolved. The simplistic fat is evil narrative didn't hold up under long-term evidence. The bigger picture matters more than a single macronutrient. Whole foods, fiber, balanced intake, overall dietary patterns. It turns out the villain wasn't fat alone, and sugar was never harmless. Story 5. Work hard for your company and they will take care of you. There was a time when staying at one company for 30 years meant a pension, steady raises, and some level of job security. Loyalty went both ways, at least more often than it does now. But modern labor markets don't really operate like that anymore. Companies answer to shareholders, quarterly earnings, and market pressures. When budgets tighten, restructuring happens. When stock prices dip, layoffs follow. And those decisions aren't usually personal, they're financial. High performers get cut. Long-tenured employees get replaced. entire departments disappear. Data shows that switching companies every few years often leads to higher salary growth than staying put. Internal raises tend to lag behind market adjustments. Loyalty can sometimes cost you earning potential. That doesn't mean hard work is useless. It means hard work should benefit you first. Skill development, negotiation leverage, career mobility. Companies optimize for survival and profit. You should optimize for your own trajectory. Loyalty is admirable. Just make sure it's not one-sided. Story 6. Medicare and Social Security will protect you. A lot of people grew up hearing that as a guarantee, and today it feels less like a promise and more like a question mark. Demographics matter. Social Security is largely funded by current workers paying into the system. As birth rates fall and life expectancy rises, the ratio of workers to retirees shrinks. Fewer people paying in, more people drawing out. That math creates long-term funding pressure. Trust fund projections have repeatedly warned that, without policy changes, benefits may eventually be reduced or adjusted. That doesn't mean the programs disappear overnight. Historically, governments modify eligibility ages, payroll taxes, or benefit formulas rather than scrap systems entirely. But modified and fully protective aren't the same thing. Medicare faces similar cost pressures as healthcare expenses rise faster than inflation. Longer lifespans mean more years of coverage, medical technology improves outcomes, and increases costs. If you're decades away from retirement, relying exclusively on federal programs is risky planning. Not because collapse is certain, but because uncertainty is real. Diversified retirement savings, investments, and contingency planning aren't paranoia, they're math. Safety nets are helpful. They just might not be sufficient on their own. Story 7. You can be anything you want. It sounds empowering. It's also incomplete. Effort matters. Opportunity matters. But so do probability, competition, timing, genetics, geography, family stability, access to resources, and sheer luck. Not everyone can be a millionaire astronaut, a chart-topping rock star, a professional gamer, and a perfect parent all at once. Some of those roles are statistically rare by definition. There are only so many seats in orbit, so many stadium tours, so many championship trophies. Scarcity isn't pessimism, it's math. That doesn't mean ambition is pointless. It means outcomes are constrained. Societies run on ordinary competence. Infrastructure, logistics, accounting, maintenance administration, healthcare support, food distribution, the boring jobs are the backbone. If everyone became a celebrity, the lights wouldn't stay on. The phrase should probably be, you can pursue what you want, but achievement sits at the intersection of desire, ability, environment, and chance. Dream big. Just understand that reality has ratios, and dignity doesn't depend on rarity. Story 8. Duck and cover. The idea that hiding under a student desk would save you from a nuclear attack sounds absurd today. A wooden desk versus a nuclear weapon? It feels laughable. But the original advice wasn't meant to stop a direct hit. It was meant to increase survival odds for people far from ground zero. A nuclear explosion produces an intense flash of thermal radiation before the blast wave arrives. That flash can cause severe burns and ignite fires. If you're near a window, the shock wave can shatter glass and send debris flying at high speed. Dropping down and covering exposed skin reduces burns. Getting below window level reduces lacerations from flying glass. In cities like Hiroshima, many injuries weren't from vaporization. They were from secondary effects: glass shards, collapsing walls, fires. Duck and cover wasn't magic. It was damage mitigation. It couldn't save you at the epicenter. Nothing could. But in outer zones, small protective actions could mean the difference between survivable injuries and fatal ones. The messaging feels naive in hindsight, but it wasn't designed for apocalypse proofing. It was designed to slightly improve survival odds in a terrifying new reality. Story 9. Hard work will make you financially successful. Work harder than everyone else. Outwork the competition. Grind now, win later. Hard work absolutely matters. Skill compounds. Experience compounds. People who consistently show up and improve tend to outperform those who don't. But hard work alone isn't a guarantee of financial success. Millions of people work brutally hard every day. Construction workers, nurses, warehouse employees, small business owners, and still live paycheck to paycheck. Effort and income aren't perfectly correlated. Market demand matters. Scarcity of skill matters. Ownership matters. Leverage matters. Someone can work 80 hours a week at a low-margin job and earn less than someone who owns a scalable asset that generates income while they sleep. Timing matters. Geography matters. Access matters. Luck matters more than we like to admit. Hard work increases your odds. It does not control the outcome. Financial success usually happens where effort intersects with opportunity, valuable skills, strategic positioning, and sometimes risk. Work ethic is powerful. It's just not a magic formula. Story 10. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. That phrase has aged poorly. Financial crises, endless wars, unprecedented wildfires, 100-year floods happening every few years, record-breaking hurricanes, mass shootings, a global pandemic. At some point you start wondering, how many lifetimes am I apparently living? Part of this is psychological. Media coverage is constant now. A disaster anywhere on Earth enters your phone within minutes. A century ago, you might never hear about half of what now feels omnipresent. Exposure has increased dramatically, but part of it is structural. Climate change increases the frequency and intensity of certain extreme weather events. Globalization increases the speed at which diseases spread. Dense urban populations amplify the impact of violence and natural disasters. Geopolitical tensions don't disappear, they shift. Once in a lifetime used to imply rarity within a local frame. Now we live in a globally connected risk environment. Statistically rare events still occur, but there are billions of people in countless systems. Rare multiplied across scale becomes regular. It's not that catastrophe suddenly started existing. It's that scale, connectivity, and exposure make it feel relentless. Peace and quiet may not come from the world calming down. It may come from narrowing your aperture within it. Story 11. No one wants to work anymore. That line gets thrown around like it's a diagnosis. It's not. People still work. They still build, serve, repair, code, clean, deliver, care, manage, and create. What fewer people are willing to do is tolerate low pay, unpredictable schedules, no benefits, constant understaffing, and daily disrespect. When wages stagnate while housing, healthcare, and education costs rise, the math changes. A starter job that once covered rent now barely covers groceries in some cities. Add in customer hostility, surveillance-style management, and zero advancement pathways, and it's not laziness driving exits, it's cost-benefit analysis. Labor markets are markets. When workers have alternatives, gig work, remote roles, trade skills, entrepreneurship, even relocation, they exercise choice. That's not moral decline, that's leverage shifting. Work itself isn't the issue. Exploitative conditions are. Most people don't mind effort, they mind imbalance. If a job pays fairly, treats people like adults, and offers some path forward, applications show up. If it doesn't, no one wants to work becomes a convenient way to avoid asking why. Story 12. That cheaters never win. Between the removal of the fairness doctrine leading to extreme and overt media bias leading to people living in echo chambers, phrases like fake news negating inconvenient facts and halting critical thinking, and gerrymandering being legal cheating is obviously the American way. Sadly, few people even realize it, and when presented with the facts, cannot accept them because generations of Americans were brainwashed into blind faith in the American system and its fairness. Story 13. Born in the early 80s, you were right in that in-between zone, the tail end of Gen X, the front edge of millennials, and the message was crystal clear. If you want a real job, you go to university. Not maybe, not consider your options. It was presented as the path. The safe path, the responsible path. And to be fair, for a while it worked. Degrees still carried strong wage premiums. Tuition, while not cheap, hadn't yet fully detached from reality. You could graduate, get hired, and reasonably expect that if you kept your head down and paid your dues, the loans would eventually disappear. It might have taken years, but it was doable. The key difference now is the ratio. Tuition climbed faster than wages. Housing climbed faster than wages. Healthcare climbed faster than wages. So the same advice, go to school, take the loans, it'll pay off, carries a much heavier burden for people born even a few years later. The structure shifted. The message didn't. It's hard to blame parents for passing down what worked in their economic environment. The frustration isn't really generational, it's structural. The ladder got taller. The rungs got farther apart. And some people are still being told it's the same climb. Story 14. Money can't buy happiness. That sounds noble. It's also incomplete. Money absolutely solves stress. It solves food insecurity. It solves medical bills sitting on the kitchen table. It solves the anxiety of a car breaking down when you can't afford repairs. It buys time, safety, and options. And when you remove chronic financial stress, mental health improves. That's not controversial. Study after study shows that increases in income significantly raise life satisfaction and reduce day-to-day stress, especially at lower and middle income levels. What money doesn't automatically buy is meaning, deep relationships, health beyond what access can provide, or immunity from loss. Once basic needs and comfort are covered, the emotional return per extra dollar starts to flatten. But if your current problems are financial, then yeah, money would make you happier. Not because you're shallow, because scarcity is exhausting. Money can't buy happiness is often said by people whose bills are already paid. For most people, money doesn't buy joy directly. It removes the barriers that make joy nearly impossible. Story 15. Trickle-down economics. The idea sounds simple. Cut taxes for corporations and the wealthy, reduce regulation, let capital accumulate at the top, and the benefits will trickle down through investment, job creation, and wage growth. In theory, more capital means more expansion. More expansion means more hiring. More hiring means higher wages. In practice, decades of economic data show the results are far more uneven. Tax cuts for high earners have often led to increased stock buybacks, asset price growth, and wealth concentration rather than proportional wage increases for workers. Income inequality has widened significantly since the 1980s, even during periods of major tax reductions at the top. Economic growth still occurs, but the distribution of gains tends to skew upward. That doesn't mean lower taxes always do nothing. They can stimulate certain sectors, increase investment in specific contexts, and improve short-term growth. But the promise that prosperity at the top reliably lifts everyone else in a broad, automatic way hasn't consistently materialized in the way it was marketed. Capital flows where incentives pointed. It doesn't automatically flow downward, and that distinction matters. Story 16. If my doctor prescribes it, it can't be bad for me, right? That's a comforting belief. It's also not how medicine works. Doctors prescribe based on evidence, risk assessment, and probability, not certainty. Every medication has potential side effects. Every treatment has trade-offs. The question isn't, is this perfectly safe? It's, do the benefits outweigh the risks for this patient in this situation? Drugs that are life-saving for one condition can cause complications in another. Antibiotics can disrupt gut bacteria. Steroids reduce inflammation, but affect immune function. Opioids relieve pain, but carry dependency risks. Even over-the-counter medications can cause liver damage or stomach bleeding if misused. Physicians rely on clinical trials, population data, and guidelines, but individuals vary. Genetics, other medications, underlying conditions, and lifestyle all influence outcomes. Most prescriptions are given because they statistically improve outcomes, but approved does not mean harmless. Medicine is risk management, not magic. Trusting your doctor is reasonable. Blind certainty is not the same thing as informed care. Story 17. I suspect crime doesn't pay is a lie told to more generations than just mine. First of all, crime is extremely profitable. We don't hear about criminals that haven't been caught because they haven't been caught. Second of all, 90% of rich people are criminals and we all just kind of accept it. E.g., through breaking labor laws. They tend to break laws in ways that save them money rather than earn them money, but it still ends up in crime absolutely paying. Edit. People seem to think I'm on about drugs or theft or other obvious crimes that come with prison sentences. I'm talking about crimes where the punishment is a fine, and the fine is of lower value than what the person made or saved committing the crime. E.g., getting a fine in the thousands after profiting in the hundreds of thousands. Low risk, high reward. Story 18. If my doctor prescribes it, it can't be bad for me, right? That's one a lot of us grew up believing. We were taught to trust the white coat. If it came from a pharmacy with your name on the label, it was safe. Approved meant harmless. Prescribed meant necessary. But medicine isn't binary. It's risk versus reward. Every drug has side effects. Some are minor, some are serious. Some don't show up until years later. Opioids were once aggressively prescribed as non-addictive. Certain medications get pulled from the market after widespread use, reveals problems that didn't surface in early trials. Doctors rely on the best available data, but that data evolves. Pharmaceutical companies fund trials. Guidelines change. What's considered safe in one decade can look reckless in hindsight. That doesn't mean doctors are villains. It means medicine is probabilistic. Prescriptions are based on likelihoods, not guarantees. The biggest lie wasn't medicine is evil. It was the idea that anything medical is automatically safe, simply because it's official. Approval doesn't mean zero risk. It means someone decided the benefits probably outweigh it. Story 19. That house prices always go up. It was treated like gravity. Buy as soon as you can, stretch for it. Take the 30-year mortgage. It's an investment. Real estate only appreciates. For a long stretch of modern history, that belief mostly worked, especially in growing cities with expanding populations and easy credit. Low interest rates amplified demand. Limited supply pushed prices higher. Homeownership became both shelter and retirement strategy, but always is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Housing prices are driven by supply, demand, interest rates, wages, zoning laws, and demographics. If there are significantly more older homeowners than younger buyers with the income to purchase at current prices, that dynamic matters. If population growth slows or reverses in certain regions, demand softens. If borrowing becomes expensive, affordability collapses quickly. Real estate tends to rise over long time horizons in growing economies. But it's not immune to stagnation or correction. Japan's housing market is a famous example of multi-decade stagnation after a bubble. A 30-year mortgage isn't automatically foolish, but the assumption of guaranteed appreciation? That's not a law of nature. It's a market trend, and trends depend on who's left to buy. Story 20. That broad internet access would launch humanity into a new age of enlightenment. We were told that once information was free and universally accessible, ignorance would fade, bad ideas would collapse under scrutiny, knowledge would democratize power. Experts would be easier to find than conspiracy theorists. And to be fair, the internet did explode access to information. You can learn physics lectures, medical basics, coding, philosophy, languages, all for free. Entire libraries sit in your pocket. But access to information isn't the same thing as wisdom. The same network that distributes peer-reviewed research also distributes misinformation at scale. Algorithms don't reward truth, they reward engagement. Emotional content spreads faster than careful nuance. Echo chambers form naturally when people can curate their own reality. Instead of one shared narrative shaped by limited gatekeepers, we now have millions of micro-narratives competing for attention. The internet didn't fail to provide knowledge. It provided too much of everything, signal and noise alike. Illumination requires discernment. Connectivity alone doesn't guarantee it. Story 21. That nuclear energy isn't safe or sustainable. For decades, the public conversation has been dominated by fear. Meltdowns, glowing waste, catastrophic failure. Meanwhile, fossil fuels quietly kept pumping out air pollution and carbon emissions on a scale that dwarfs nuclear's historical harm. Per unit of energy produced, nuclear has one of the lowest death rates of any major energy source. Coal's particulate pollution alone kills hundreds of thousands globally every year. Oil spills contaminate ecosystems. Natural gas leaks methane. Nuclear's high-profile accidents are rare, and modern reactor designs are significantly safer than early generations. As for waste, the volume is tiny compared to fossil fuel waste streams. All the used nuclear fuel produced in decades of U.S. power generation would fit in a relatively small physical footprint compared to the continuous atmospheric dumping of COVID from coal and gas plants. The difference is visibility. Nuclear waste is contained and monitored. Fossil fuel waste is diluted into air and oceans. Cost arguments are more complicated. Nuclear plants are expensive to build up front, largely due to regulatory, financing, and construction complexity. But once operational, they produce massive amounts of low-carbon electricity for decades. The debate isn't as simple as nuclear perfect, everything else evil, but the blanket narrative that nuclear is uniquely unsafe that hasn't matched the long-term data. Energy policy is shaped by economics, politics, and public perception. And perception can be powerful. Story 22. The idea that the system naturally selects the most capable person, the smartest, the hardest working, the most deserving. It's a clean story. It's also incomplete. Ability matters. Skill matters. Discipline matters. But so do starting position, family wealth, access to education, neighborhood safety, nutrition, social capital, and who answers your phone call when you need an introduction. Some people are born on third base and told they hit a triple. Legacy admissions, internship pipelines, unpaid opportunities only accessible to those who don't need income, networks that quietly pass resumes to the top of the pile before a job is even posted, referrals that skip algorithm filters entirely. Connections compound just like capital. If your parents know executives, attorneys, investors, or politicians, you inherit access. Not just money, access, information about opportunities before they're public, guidance on how to navigate institutions, safety nets if you fail. That doesn't mean effort is irrelevant. It means effort operates inside structure. Meritocracy sounds fair. Reality is layered. Talent helps you run fast. But if someone else started 3 laps ahead, the race was never neutral to begin with. Story 23. You have a future. Nah, we might have done, but you strip-mined the planet for profit. You strip-mined our consciousnesses and experiences for profit. You strip-mined our health and our wants and needs for profit. You lied, and lied again. You put your happiness above the futures. You decided the developing world was just shapes on a map and marginalized them. You went to the ballot box and voted in the wreckers, the layers, the confidence tricksters, the 3-cup trick fakes, the find the lady con artists, and you did it with a smile. You did it while you told us that you did it with your bootstraps and walked uphill each way. And you came from nothing. And you did this while you plugged up your ears and you covered your eyes and you told us the internet was bad and never learned about it. You told us change wasn't possible and that the system was working. You told us that we weren't working hard enough, that our avocados were too luxurious. You told us to take the bus in the society you took public services away from. You told us to pay our taxes to politicians you elected who pocketed them. Story 24. The American Dream. Work hard, play by the rules, buy a house, raise a family, retire comfortably. That was the script. For a long stretch in the mid-20th century, it felt attainable. Wages rose with productivity. A single income could support a household. College tuition was manageable. Housing, relative to income, was far cheaper. Upward mobility wasn't universal, but it was statistically more common. Over time, the math shifted. Wages flattened relative to productivity. Housing outpaced income in many regions. Healthcare and education costs climbed. Two incomes became the baseline for what one income used to sustain. Debt became normalized. The dream didn't disappear. It got more expensive and more unevenly distributed. Upward mobility still happens, but it's more sensitive to zip code, family wealth, education access, and social capital than the slogan suggests. The narrative promised a broadly accessible ladder. The reality is a competitive system with constrained rungs. The American dream wasn't pure fiction. It was historically conditional, and the conditions changed while the slogan stayed the same. Story 25. The Food Pyramid. For years, it sat in classrooms and doctors' offices like gospel. A giant base of bread, cereal, rice, and pasta. Fats at the tiny tip. Simple. Official. Government-backed. And wildly oversimplified. The original pyramid heavily emphasized refined grains at a time when low-fat dieting dominated public health messaging. Fat was treated broadly as the enemy. Meanwhile, added sugars weren't clearly separated from whole carbohydrates, and processed grain products benefited from being grouped under grains. Nutrition science is more nuanced than a triangle. Not all fats are equal, not all carbohydrates are equal. Whole foods behave differently in the body than refined ones. Dietary patterns matter more than single categories. There were also agricultural and political influences shaping recommendations. Subsidized crops like corn and wheat naturally aligned with a grain-heavy base. That doesn't mean it was malicious, but it wasn't purely biochemical truth either. Over time, the pyramid was replaced with updated models that emphasize vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats in more balanced proportions. The problem wasn't that nutrition guidance existed. It was pretending something that complex could be reduced to a brightly colored pyramid for everyone. Story 26. Retirement. For a long time, it was framed as the finish line. Work 30-40 years, collect a pension, draw Social Security, downsize, travel, relax. That model was real. For a specific window of history, defined benefit pensions were common. Housing was cheaper relative to income. Healthcare costs were lower. A single career at one company could carry you to a predictable retirement. Then the structure shifted. Pensions largely disappeared and were replaced with 401(k), pushing investment risk onto individuals. Wages stagnated relative to productivity. Housing, healthcare, and education costs rose faster than inflation. Life expectancy increased, which means retirement savings have to stretch longer. Market volatility now directly affects retirement timelines. None of that means retirement is impossible. It means it's no longer automatic. It requires disciplined saving, investing, and often dual incomes. And for many people living paycheck to paycheck, that's a tall order. Boomers benefited from timing, post-war growth, expanding asset values, strong labor conditions. Later generations faced tighter margins and more individual risk. The idea of work hard and you'll retire comfortably used to be a broad expectation. Now it's a strategic project, and for some it feels like a moving target. Story 27. Wages, specifically the disconnect between wage growth and corporate profits. For decades after World War II, productivity and wages rose together. When companies produced more per worker, workers generally earned more. That link felt natural, fair even. Then it started to separate. Productivity continued climbing. Corporate profits hit record highs in multiple sectors. Stock markets expanded, executive compensation ballooned, but median wage growth, adjusted for inflation, flattened in many industries. The gains didn't disappear. They shifted. More went to shareholders, more went to stock buybacks, more went to executive compensation. Globalization, automation, weakened unions, and the financialization of corporations all played roles in redistributing where the value flowed. That doesn't mean wages never rise. They do, especially in tight labor markets or specialized fields. But broadly, the idea that rising corporate success automatically lifts worker pay hasn't consistently held over the past few decades. The narrative was simple. If the company thrives, you thrive. The data shows it's more complicated. Profit growth and wage growth are not the same line anymore. Story 28. That material wealth is the priority. We were taught to measure success in visible upgrades: bigger house, newer car, better phone, higher salary, promotions, status symbols that signal progress to everyone else. It becomes the scoreboard. But long-term happiness research consistently shows that once basic needs and reasonable comfort are met, additional material gain has diminishing emotional returns. After a certain income threshold, enough for security, stability, and freedom from constant stress, more money adds less and less life satisfaction. What tends to matter more? Relationships, health, time, autonomy, purpose, community. Material wealth can support those things. It can also crowd them out. Chasing income at the expense of sleep, family, friendships, or mental health can leave someone objectively successful and internally empty. The pursuit becomes the habit becomes identity, and suddenly the accumulation never feels like enough. Wealth isn't meaningless. It just isn't the ultimate metric. Security is powerful, but fulfillment rarely comes from square footage or brand logos. It comes from how and with whom you spend your time. Story 29. We live in the freest country on earth. That line gets repeated early and often. Freedom framed as speech protections, gun ownership, market choice, flag-waving certainty. It becomes part of identity before you're old enough to define the word yourself. But freedom is multidimensional. If you can legally buy a firearm but can't afford basic health care without risking bankruptcy, what does that say about your practical freedom? If higher education requires decades of debt, how freely can you choose your career path? If missing 2 paychecks means eviction, how free are you to leave a toxic job? If you haven't had a true vacation in years because you can't step away financially, how free is your time? Legal freedom and lived freedom aren't identical. Some countries restrict speech more but guarantee health care and paid leave. Others maximize market liberty but leave social safety largely to individuals. Different systems prioritize different definitions of liberty. The narrative tends to focus on constitutional rights. The lived experience often hinges on economic security. Freedom isn't just what the law allows, it's what your circumstances permit. And for many people, those two things feel increasingly far apart. Story 30. Crystals. No, Emily, that rose quartz is not going to make someone fall in love with you. That amethyst isn't clearing your skin. That chunk of citrine isn't protecting you from negative energy. They're minerals, silicon dioxide, carbon structures, trace elements arranged in geometric lattices under heat and pressure over millions of years. That's what makes them beautiful. Not mystical vibrations, not intention fields, not manifestation frequencies. There's no credible scientific evidence that crystals emit energy capable of altering biology, influencing other people's emotions, or changing external events. If they did, we'd be measuring it. Physics doesn't leave room for secret love attraction waves hiding in decorative rocks. What is real is the placebo effect. If holding something symbolic makes you feel calmer, more confident, or more intentional, that shift in mindset can influence your behavior. You might act differently, speak differently, carry yourself differently, but that change is coming from you, not the rock. Enjoy them for aesthetics. Enjoy them for symbolism. Enjoy them for ritual if it helps you focus. Just don't confuse geology with magic. Argue with the wall.